Good morning and welcome to the Gospel Loft this morning. We have finished the letter that Paul wrote to the Colossians, verse by verse, in English. We still have a few parts to go in our German exposition, and I would like to start next time the letter to the Galatians. Now, to be able to do the German and the English part at the same time, we have now a little gap. And I want to use this gap to read a book to you. About 2 years ago, I wrote a book in German called When Angels Let You Fall and God Picks You Up. And this is the little book. And it was so successful, really, and people thought it was wonderful. And then I decided to translate it or rewrite it in English also. And this is what I've done. And here is the manuscript for it. But I'm not going to print it again now in English because it just costs 10 euros every time on every book. So I'm going to read the whole book, chapter by chapter, for you. And you can use it as an audio book. And here we go. When Angels Let You Fall. It starts chapter 1, and I've used a scripture to start the chapter. For he shall give his angels charge over thee, to keep thee in all thy ways. If the ladder is too short, we just add another one to it and tie them together. Now it reaches the ridge of the roof, about 5 meters off the ground. Absolutely no problem, as I have bought some strong cable ties. They would hold the two ladders together. The day was very hot, and it was about 30 degrees, and even the aluminium rungs felt hot. It was about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, a lovely September day. Hopefully it will become a little cooler later, I thought. I take a brush, paint, thinners, and on the ladder I go, all the way to the top. And the fascia boards need a coat of paint. And already trouble starts. The cable ties give in. My hands are full with brush and paint and thinners and cloth. Nowhere to hold on. 1 second passes, 2 seconds. The cable ties come apart. And the 3rd second begins. I'm in the air, then on the hard gravel floor. And how long can the journey be from 5 meters to ground zero? The bones were breaking. One could hear them cracking. Then it was deathly silent, only the pain quite unbearable. The first thought that came to mind was, oh, Jesus, he suffered much more. But where were the angels promised in Psalm 91? I began to check my body. The left leg, not broken. Both arms can be moved, all good. My head is in one piece, my back, no pain. Then comes the right leg. Oh, the thigh bone is broken in 4 places, and a chip has come off it. But I'm alive. Above me I see big eyes staring at me. My neighbors have congregated around me, my wife also. Then the ambulance arrives. Then the bumpy ride to the hospital. They operate on me for 2.5 hours, hammering a 9-inch nail through the bones. Then comes the waking up part. It was like a battle between life and death. Inside it screams, I want to live. And then it went back into the depths of blackness. I realized that the nightmare had its good side. We wake up from it. The man who enters a lost eternity will never waken out of it. What a terrifying thought. Something came to my memory again and again during the first 7 days. It was not the first time in my life that adversity and misery touched my life. The last 50 years were full of it. It was almost a comforting thought. Already early in life I had to cross the valleys of adversity, but every time it brought me a step closer to God, although often unawares. This 1 second in the air let my whole life pass before my eyes, as if it was a high-speed dream. I am 76 years old when I was writing this book. Much was brought back to memory that moment, things which were pushed to the very back of the mind. It is not as much what we do with the experiences of life as it is what God achieved in us through it. What is man that thou art mindful of it? Pieces of scripture come like inserts into my mind. Now I sit in my bed in hospital and think about all the people that walked into my life in these last few days. The hospital workers, from chief surgeon to the cleaning lady from Kenya, all are walking past me, and all have their own valleys to cross outside the hospital walls. All are wearing some kind of mask, and behind the fast mask are the hidden battles of life, just like mine. All of them are clothed in some uniform, which gives them some authority for a few hours each day. But then they all go home again, tired from putting on a smile, a friendly word to strangers, tired from the formalities and duties which are placed on them. Yet all that, it provides a comfortable life outside of their duties. It looks like a volcano sweeping out ash or spewing out ash, and no one knows when the molten rocks explode. These are the people around me. I see them every day, and when looking into the mirror, I see that I am just like them. My thoughts are sweeping back over the last 50 years, and I begin to write when angels let you fall and God picks you up again. And then we come to chapter 2. And here I've written Psalm 8, verses 4 and 5 as an introduction. What is man that thou art mindful of him, and the Son of Man that thou visitest him? For thou hast made him a little lower than the angels, and hast crowned him with glory and honor. I was 22 years old, young, full of life. I had 3 international job offers, and my contract for extra education was almost finished. The year was 1966. It had almost come to an end. Where should I go? To Buenos Aires, in Argentina, to Tokyo, or to Cape Town perhaps? Cape Town was the most inviting destination. Some of my colleagues had already gone there. It was an easy decision. It would be Cape Town, the Cape of Good Hope. I was well schooled and qualified in the field of reproduction and the graphic field, and it was well paid. All over the world, the company offered a paid journey, either by plane or by boat. I choose to fly with as many stops as possible. The first break was in Cairo, in Egypt. It was interesting how certain things stick in our mind and become a cherished memory. A ride on a camel near the pyramids, the stinking open sewer along the road to the camel ride, the never-ending hooting of thousands of cars day and night, and of course the meat market in the open. I had the idea that the plague of flies during Moses' time had never ended. One could see the meat only behind a black mass of pitch black flies covering it. And after a few days it was time to leave, and there was the taxi ride to the airport at night. It was dark and no street lights on the way to the airport. It did not bother the driver, and he did not see it necessary to switch on the lights on his 1950 Citroen either. Only where a road crossed the highway were the lights put on for a moment, and after that it was pitch dark again. As if to compensate for this, he put his foot flat down on the accelerator. Then the second adventure began. I had no idea about the African way of doing things concerning air traffic. My second leg of the journey was from Cairo to Nairobi on East African Airways with a stop at Addis Ababa. As I got to the airport in Cairo, I was informed that the flight was 8 hours delayed because the landing flaps would not extend at the wings and the damage had to be repaired first. It was a VC-10, quite obsolete already at the time, I guess, or perhaps just an older model. After 8 hours the plane took off and I experienced a marvelous sunrise over the Sudan. Soon after, the voice of the captain came over the intercom. "This is the captain speaking. The flight has been diverted to Entebbe in Uganda. We cannot land in Addis Ababa. The runway is too short for a landing without the flaps." The runway in Entebbe was probably not longer, but ended at Lake Victoria, with the possibility of a better finale on the water than crashing into trees on land. Then eventually it was time to set the plane on terra firma. The landing gear was out, the flaps still stuck in the wings, and the result was a tremendous crashing sound as the wheels hit the tarmac at high speed. The lake came fast closer and closer, and it seemed that the plane had no brakes either. But seemingly it did have, and just before the water, the nose of the plane bowed gently and came to a stop. I think even the chickens on the plane were relieved and gave a chuckle of appreciation as the ordeal had come to an end. The 10 lonely passengers on the plane regained their original color in their faces, and we left the plane unharmed. Another plane came out of hangar and flew us to Nairobi for the next adventure. The 2 days in Nairobi are etched deeply into my European mind and memory. Africa was just different, and I had no idea about people and culture. To me, every black man was playing jazz, trumpet, and sang with a gravelly voice, just like Louis Armstrong. We arrived in Nairobi with the airport bus. It seemed to be the only real road to town. In the middle of it was a dry grass verge. On it were dozens of people sleeping in the hot midday sun. It looked as if they were dead. I could speak hardly any English and tried to communicate in French, first at the hotel and then on the road. Man, we are in East Africa and nobody speaks French here. That was the common thing. The second episode came the next day. I had to purchase something African and I was looking for an African market. One saw hardly any white people, and the further from the center of town, the more African faces were to be seen. In my imagination, they all were just like Louis, and perhaps Miles Davis. Being Swiss, colonialism had no meaning. We never had any colonies or slaves in that way. Then I had to change my film in my 8mm movie camera. And it had to be done in a dark place. I landed in a dark, dingy African bar, filled with a bunch of unfriendly faces. Soon they began to crowd in on me and hurled what must have been insults at me. A West African man came to help me, as he spoke French, and he explained to me that I had landed in a Mau Mau bar and the people wanted to beat me up because they thought that I was an Englishman whom they perceived as their colonial enemies. Well, Africa was not just trumpet sounds and sunshine. After another 2 days, I left for Johannesburg, and the only memory I seem to have is the perfect landing of another VC-10 by BOAC. It was the softest landing up to now, and well done, my captain. In Cape Town, I was greeted by the company's manager and taken to the hotel in his 1953 Mercedes 190D, which he apparently bought with him from Santiago, where he previously had worked. The hotel was an old colonial building, and the room smelled old and musty. It was a Friday, and the man left with the words, "See you on Monday, 8 o'clock at work." And he handed me an envelope with the words, "These are your wages for the time you were traveling." Everything looked so good, and I still thought that I should have taken the boat. Then the envelope with the money would have been much thicker. The weather was absolutely fantastic. The beach with white sand, the palm trees and the sunsets, a pocket full of money. I was in paradise. Oh, it had come true, and I was never going to leave it again. Soon after that, we hired a house in Camps Bay. 4 young Swiss people, bachelors, together. 2 minutes walk to the beach. It was a beautiful bay just outside of Cape Town, and at the weekends it was filled with the most gorgeous young ladies. Cape Town had this unfair composition between men and women. There were 7 women to 1 man. It sounded almost biblical. Then I had to buy myself a car, a VW Beetle, as it was impractical to go to work with public transport. One never had the feeling to be on the way to work, though, but rather to be on a holiday trip every day along the beach to Cape Town. The work itself was like holiday. We were 5 men in the department and divided the work among ourselves, which I was used to do by myself in Switzerland. I got used to this very, very quickly. Then in June 1967, I had to take the first 10 days of my holidays. A friend from work and I decided to go to Durban with my folksy. We changed a few things and flattened the seats in such a way that we could sleep in it. It wasn't all that comfortable, but good enough to save money on hotels. Durban in June is great, best time of the year. There was no road along the coast from East London to Durban, and we had to drive through the Transkei and part of Lesotho. What some would call a road, we called a potholed track. When 2 ignorant Swiss go on safari, it becomes a nightmare. And I'm surprised that the poor car even made it at all. Up to that point, I had hardly painted any pictures, and slowly the inspiration came back. In 1964, I lived in Paris like any other artist who wanted to fulfill that dream. There it had been no problem to paint, as it was the place to do it. One could set the brush almost to automatic. In Africa, it works different. The priorities changed, and of course the light, the colors, and the culture was so different. In Europe, everything was gray, grayer and grayest, be it the people or the environment. My paintings from that period testified of it. All they looked somewhat colorless and showed a faceless society. We see the end product in the painting on the screen. Our environment shapes our being more than what we think. What did remain from that trip? Well, there is always a memory that cleaves to our mind, especially our journey back from Lesotho. We nearly died of cold in the mountains and tried the wintry Karoo, and it treated us the same way. This wasn't Africa. This was a deep freeze. How good did it feel when we were back in Cape Town and somewhat experienced a milder climate. Or I went out and searched for an art shop to get some paint and canvas. An old habit was awaking again, as my artistic part had been drowned in all this new excitement of holidays and sunshine in Durban. After a while I left the house in Camps Bay and moved into a flat more in the center of town. Where is the summer? The sunshine gone. July, August, September were real winter months, even in Cape Town, and I longed for spring and some warmth. Yet it made me paint again. It is interesting how the palette changes and submits itself to the new surroundings. Everything looked olive green and orange, and somehow these colors jumped onto the canvas. And eventually summer came. In Europe, the change of season comes gradually, almost hesitant. Here down south, summer falls with a door into the house like an explosion. Today it is winter and tomorrow we have summer. Where is the bathing costume? The sun has come. And then November came. Almost a year has passed. How is your English? Oh, how is it coming on? One has to be inventive when learning a language. I bought a cheap paperback, Wild West story or some crime story, sat in a bath and began to read aloud for everyone to hear. I had no idea what was written or if I pronounced the words correctly. The same words came up again and again, and after 5 repetitions I went to the dictionary and the phonetic writing. The word was in. After 3 months of taking a bath with an English book, I got through a book every second day, and I knew what was written. After that, I began to have conversations with myself and formed my own sentences. Until next time, when we go on to chapter 3.